The Rwandan Genocide, a civil war between the Hutsis and the Tutsis, and the final case study in this unit. To start, in this unit, genocide, we have been looking at the roots of genocide, whether it is the roots of racism or the difference between genocide and ethnic cleansing. The case study on Rwanda can be viewed from any three of these points of view. But with the Rwanda genocide, between April and June of 1994, an estimated 800,000 Rwandans from a group known as the Tutsis were killed in a span of 100 days. Our case study will be the focus of their story and why so many were killed. To begin, you want to ask yourself and understand who were the Hutus and who were the Tutsis. The Hutus and Tutsis are two groups of people that settled in present-day Rwanda close to 2,000 years ago. However, the actual ethnic genealogical background and true origins is extremely complicated and not entirely clear even today. It has been surmised by some scientists that some Tutsis might have migrated to the area of Rwanda from present-day Ethiopia, but this is not entirely clear. However, over a span of time, both the Hutus and Tutsis worked together and did become united. And because of this, they developed a single language called Kinyarwanda and one set of a religious and philosophical sets of beliefs. As you can see on this map, long ago, the countries of Rwanda and Burundi were one nation. And in these nations, this is where the Hutus and the Tutsis lived. In the top right corner, the inset map shows you exactly where this was located. This country of Rwanda is not a large geographical area. But the Hutus and Tutsis were cultivators and they raised livestock. With the fertile soil and regular rainfall, the area of Rwanda, where the region where the Hutus and Tutsis lived, eventually became the most densely populated area and nation in population density out of anywhere else on the entire continent of Africa. That would be a very important geopolitical point to remember. But despite the density, in the 18th century, when Rwanda emerged as a powerful and populous nation, 1800s being a time period of when European colonial imperialist powers were trying to do a land grab, the Rwanda rulers became and began to measure their power in the number of cattle that they had. The Tutsis were rich in cattle, and because of that, they were referred to as the elite ruling class. However, on the other hand, the Hutu had less livestock, and because they had less livestock, they were deemed to have less power. In a demographic point of view, the Hutus were the majority of the population, around 85%, but they were considered the commoners. The Tutsis, however, were the minority of the overall population at around 14%, but they were considered the elite ruling class because of their large estates, large number of servants, and most importantly, the large number of cattle that they possessed. With these two groups, though, marriage would be a very, well, important part of their life. And although there were some families that did intermarry, most Hutus married Hutus, most Tutsis married Tutsis. Because there's lack of, well, essentially genetic diversity, this impacted the genetics of how the Hutus and the Tutsis would begin to look. In their physical appearance, because the Hutus and Tutsis did not usually intermarry, their offspring began to develop similarities in their features. The Tutsis were often very tall, thin, with narrow features and fair skin, whereas the Hutus were shorter, stronger, with more broader features and darker skin. Remember back when we were looking at the origin roots of racism. A good movie is called Hotel Rwanda. This picture from the movie shows the physical appearance distinction between the two groups. If you wish, you may very well want to watch the movie on your own time. But continuing with the notes, colonization, European colonization. The Germans were the first Europeans to colonize the area of Rwanda, and the Germans achieved this in the early 1900s and prior to the start of World War I. The Germans helped to fight off other countries that wanted to attack Rwanda, the countries that wanted to attack the Hutsis and Tutsis. And because of this protection, the Germans helping to protect Rwanda, it made the bond between these two sides strong. Continuing with colonization, however, after World War I, the United Nations, also known as the League of Nations today, decided that Germany could no longer rule Rwanda. Rwanda was now under the safeguards of the United Nations, i.e., League of Nations, and it was to be governed by Belgium. Note I'm using the term United Nations rather than League of Nations. I'm doing that intentionally because our next unit is entirely based on the United Nations, so this is being served as essentially a bridge between the end of this unit and the beginning of the third unit. But continuing with Belgium, Belgium decided to use the class system that had already been put in place to serve to their own advantage. The Belgians favored the Tutsis and gave them privileges and Western-style education. If you're asking why the people of Belgium or the government decided to do this, there was one main reason. The Belgians did this so they can maintain control over the area of Rwanda. And this would seem to be the easiest, quote-unquote, way to achieve and maintain that control. The Belgians also favored the Tutsis because they appeared more European in their tall, slender appearance. And they, being the Belgian officials, discriminated against the Hutus because they appeared to be less European. At this point, you may want to pause this recording and ask yourself and quickly reflect on these two questions. How do you think the Hutus felt about this? How do you think the Tutsis felt about this? This would be a good time to also do some personal awareness and express your thoughts, as these are very complicated topics. During the Belgium government oversight, identification cards were made. After creating laws that gave special privileges to the Tutsis, the Belgians ran into a problem, and the problem was how could they be sure who was a Tutsi and who was a Hutu? Even though the physical appearances were identified for some, but not for all people. The solution would be, in this rather unscientific method, was to have every single citizen register and carry an identification card. If you had no proof, it, if you could not give proof of your ancestry, the Belgian government will simply assign your proof based upon your physical height and other physical appearances. If you appeared to be more European, you were classified as Tutsi. If you were shorter, darker, stronger, etc., you were deemed as a Hutu. Bear in mind, this is before genetics and DNA testing and all the sciences that now exist today in the early 21st century. These images show what the identification cards look like. Soon, however, the Hutus got tired of this form of discrimination. What do you think they might have done with this? The result is called Parmehutu. The Party of the Emancipation of the Hutus was formed in 1959. It was called Parmehutu. Hutus rebelled against the colonial government of Belgium and the Tutsi religion. The Parmehutu resulted in 150,000 Tutsis fleeing to the area of Burundi, which was at this time part of Rwanda. In the 1960s, however, Belgium would withdraw from Rwanda. After Belgium had withdrawn from Rwanda, Rwanda and Burundi split into two independent sovereign countries. Despite the split and the forming of national capitals and leaders and all the stuff that goes on with the forming of a country, the Hutus continued to fight the Tutsis. Still angry at being repressed and discriminated against for so many years, the Hutus fought against the Tutsis. Many Tutsis were massacred, and many more would flee to Rwanda. This was the beginning of a humanitarian crisis, and a crisis that would take many unexpected turns. While igniting the violence, a well-known Hutu leader, Dr. Leon Musiguriya, appealed to the Tutsis to send the Tutsis back to Ethiopia via the rivers. Other Hutus said that this needed to clean up the quote-unquote filth and to clean or kill the Tutsi cockroaches. This is very discriminatory and very racist in this. Once again, think about the origins. But negotiations began in 1993, following a month of negotiations by President Habyarimana, a Hutu president, and the RPF, which is short for Rwanda Patriotic Front, and they worked to sign a peace accord that called for the return of all Tutsi refugees. From these negotiations, 2,500 United Nations troops, peacekeepers essentially, were deployed to Kigali to oversee the peace accord. These United peacekeepers would be led by a Canadian general, and this Canadian general, this will be his first active war zone command. However, would there be peace with this? Despite the peace accord, the Rwanda president stalled in creating a unified government in which the power would be shared. At the same time, various trainings and militias around the country were underway, and as the militias became more trained, more armed, the violence between the different sides would continue to intensify. An extremist radio station, Radio Miles Collins, began to warn, "It is almost time for us to cut down all the tall trees." This is the code for it is almost time to kill everyone. Rwanda was disintegrating. A warning from human rights groups were warning the international community, the United States, NATO, United Nations, various NGO humanitarian groups were warning everyone who would listen that the impending genocide was going to happen in Rwanda. And in March 1994, the human rights groups were forced to flee Rwanda due to the level of violence and calamity that were happening. Only the American Red Cross made the decision to stay behind there. Even the United Nations was forced to leave for a variety of reasons. Essentially, though, the main reason, especially for countries such as the United States, was the American president, Bill Clinton, was focused on matters of interest towards the United States and not, well, it wasn't viewed as a in the American interest to send American soldiers to Rwanda just to have them be sent back in body bags. Rwanda was not in the interest of the United States, especially with what had happened in Somalia just a couple of years before. For that and a variety of other reasons, including the rising levels of violence in Rwanda and tensions globally, the United Nations pulled most of the troops back, leaving the Canadian commander only with a paltry, small, ill-equipped force. What that would lead to? Genocide. A date which will live in infamy. There's a quote often referred to when the United States entered into the Second World War. But this quote can also be used for the 6th of April, 1994, when the President Habyarimana and the President of Burundi, Cyprien Ntaryamira, were killed when their airplane was shot down. No one knows for sure who shot down the president's plane. There are many, many theories that the Hutus did this, and there are many other theories that the Tutsis did this. While the blame and finger pointing has never been resolved, one thing that was known for sure was that after the plane was shot down that same night, the genocide began. The Hutu militia, at one point, had 30,000 people strong slaughter any Tutsi that came in their path. They encouraged regular Hutu civilians to do the same. In some cases, Hutus were forced to kill their Tutsis' neighbors. It was a bloodbath. The death toll in the span of 100 days was estimated to be 800,000, but the numbers have never been fully independently verified. They were killed primarily with using knives, machetes, and clubs. Out of the 800,000 that were killed, 100,000 were children. Where was the help? Where was the United States? Where was the United Nations? Are very unfortunate and potent questions. While the genocide in Rwanda was happening, the world did nothing. No troops were sent. No aid was sent. At the end of the genocide, in July, the Tutsi organization had captured the Rwanda capital of Kigali. This led to the government collapsing, and then the Tutsis declared a ceasefire. As soon as it became apparent to the Hutus that Tutsis were victorious, 2 million of them fled to Zaire, which is now the Republic of Congo, the country to the north. A new government was established on the 19th of July. A new multi-ethnic government was formed, promising all refugees that they could have a safe return to Rwanda. Pastor Bizimungu, a Hutu, was inaugurated as president while the majority of the cabinet posts were assigned to the Tutsis. Was there justice for the genocide? Well, the new government of Rwanda continues to seek justice for the innocent who are murdered, not close to 1 million people. Many people have been tried in court and found guilty of war crimes. 500 were put to death for their crime. Another 100,000 are still in prison. What does the future hold for Rwanda? Only time will tell. However, in recent years, the healing has begun in Rwanda, and Rwanda does have a higher level of literacy, development, income. Rwanda is slowly emerging as a regional power in the continent of Africa. And the case study of what happens in the past and how forgiveness and healing can be done.